Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Flick 'em Up from Pretzel Games. This is the big wooden heavy box edition. I think that the next time that they print the game, it might be a normal edition. I don't know, or maybe they're going to keep the box wooden forever. I'm not entirely sure on that. But this is a dexterity game. The theme is that you're in the Wild West, and you're either going to be one of the lawmen or one of the outlaws, the outlaw cowboys, and you are playing on teams and trying to meet certain objectives. This is actually a scenario-driven game as well, or you can just set it up however you want and set whatever goals you want. But with all the different scenarios, you're trying to either take out the enemy leader, which might be the sheriff or the leader of the outlaws, or you're trying to get more money than the other players or keep the other players from meeting their objectives. All of these different things, but the main mechanism of the game is literally flicking discs around the table. Discs to determine how you move, to determine whether or not you can hit the other players with your bullets and take them out, and so on. There's lots of cool wooden terrain and things and buildings to set up, lots of stuff like that. Go ahead and give you a brief overview of how the game works. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, let me give you a quick rundown of Flick 'em Up. This is a competitive game for two teams of players. You are either going to be the lawmen or the cowboys. You actually have two little stanchions over here that you set up that you'll put your little character tokens on. And up above there, you'll have little spots to put your heart tokens indicating your hit points. And any other little things you pick up, like extra guns. You see that there's a gun already printed onto the cardboard, indicating that is the one gun that you have. But you may gain more depending on the scenario. And that's the thing, is that this game is scenario-driven. There's a whole scenario book that you have. You can, obviously, for this, I just set up all the stuff. This is everything, all the major stuff in the game for the most part, except for a couple other little things, like a couple of bystanders and stuff like that. You'd probably play in a little bit of a wider area, and people wouldn't be so clustered together, but I just wanted to give you a quick breakdown of it. The scenario is going to tell you, essentially, what you're trying to do. It might be something like, just kill the sheriff if you're on the outlaw team, or kill the head of the outlaws if you're on the sheriff's team, or you might have to get a bunch of gold, or make sure that the cowboys don't meet their objective, so on and so forth. It all depends on the scenario, and it will tell you the layout of all the buildings, where your cowboys will start, where the outlaws will start, and so on. Most, if not all, of the scenarios also have a bit of a time limit. So if someone doesn't meet their objective by the time that this clock, which keeps track of the rounds, gets to 12, then the game is just going to end anyways, and either nobody wins, or you just decide arbitrarily who is going to win at that point, or have a duel, which I'll explain in a moment. Other setup. Now, all of the lighter colored pawns are the sheriff's men, lawmen will say, and then all the darker colored meeples are the outlaws. But they all have hats. The cowboy hats serve two purposes. One is that they have numbers on them, and the numbers will correspond to those player tokens I showed you earlier. But also, the hats are either red or blue. Now, the clock that I was showing you, all the numbers are colored to red or blue. And whenever you, so at the start of the game, starts off at 6 o'clock, and all the color is red, so all the hats will be on red. As you activate your actions, as you activate each individual cowboy or outlaw or lawmen, you're going to flip their hat over to the blue side. Then they don't get to act again until everyone has acted, and you're going to go on to the next hour on the clock, which is blue. Therefore, all the cowboys who have blue hats are going to activate, and you'll flip them over to red, and so on and so forth. Essentially, it's just a way for you to keep track of who you've already activated in the round. The turns in this game are pretty simple too. You're just going to decide which team is going to go first at the start of the game. And when you're on a team, you're not really taking control of a cowboy. It's just that you're going back and forth. So Team A, representing the lawmen, might say, okay, we're going to let Jane go first. And then you'll set your own player order. But Jane can activate any of the lawmen that she wants. And then she'll take their actions and then flip over their hat. Then it goes to the outlaw team. And the outlaws then say, okay, Bill is going to go first. And Bill is just going to activate one of the outlaws. And it'll go back and forth with each person on each team taking control of one of the lawmen or the cowboys on the fly. But you always keep your player order the same, but the order that the actual meeples are going to activate is going to change depending on the situation. So on your turn, you have two actions when you're activating one of the figures. You have two actions that you can take, but you have three options for those actions. One of them is to move, one of them is to shoot, and one of them is to utilize something. You can take something, pick it up, activate it, something like that. So let's talk about movement and shooting first. And as the name of the game implies, this is flicking. You are flicking things around the table. So one important thing to note is that there's a very specific way you're allowed to flick. You can't go like this or that or that. You always just put your finger against the table and go boom, and flick the disc just like that. Okay? Normal flick, just let your finger coast along the table and hit it. You can do a power move if you want, that's up to you, but that is the standard way that you are supposed to flick in the game. Now the first type of action you can take, like I said, is moving. This is in fact the movement disc. When you want to move one of the figures, I'm just going to call them cowboys just for simplicity's sake, then you're going to physically pick up and sort of make sure that you get this as accurate as possible, but pick up the figure and replace it with the movement disc, and then you're going to flick the disc to determine its movement. Now, a few things here. First off, your movement has to be unimpeded, meaning you cannot hit another figure, you cannot hit a cactus, you cannot hit a barrel, you cannot hit anything else. If you do hit something else doing a normal move, then you have wasted your action and you do not move at all. You go back to your origin point approximately. The exception to this rule is if you're trying to go inside a building. Each of these buildings has like a space between the two stanchions on the bottom there. If you hit the inside of one of those, you're fine. Your disc just needs to at least partially cross the threshold going around to the back of the building. And if you do that, you actually put your figure on top of one of the stanchions here, representing that you're inside the building. But for a normal movement outside, you need to make sure that you don't hit anything. So if this was my movement, I would go, okay, I want to get over there as quickly as possible, so boom. So I didn't hit anything, so now I'm just making poor moves, by the way. Although, this is not a bad place to be in, because now I'm right here and I can shoot this guy from close range, but I'm totally out in the open. But anyways, I would replace the movement disc with my figure, and I can orient myself however I want, and that is important for shooting, because now I want to put myself in a position where I have a clear shot at someone. So the other type of action I could take is shooting, and these are the bullets that you're going to use. How you're going to do this, you pick either the left or right side of your figure where their little meeple hands are, and you need to be a bullet's length away. So you kind of calculate, you can either guesstimate, or what I like to do is actually physically put a bullet there, just because I'm an anal retentive dork. Put a bullet there, put one next to it, remove the first bullet, so that's a bullet length away on either side, and that's where you're going to flick from. Now your goal here is not just to hit one of the cowboys, you want to knock them over. If you don't knock them over, it's just a grazing wound and it does nothing. If you do knock them over, not only are they knocked down, and they can no longer be hit until they get back up again during their next activation, but they also lose one of their hit points. If they lose too many hit points, it's normally 3, then they are out of the game, they are dead. But otherwise, flicking is just like with the movement disc. I'm actually going to aim at this one because I think it's more interesting. So let's just say it was like this, and I'm probably going to miss, but who knows? Let's see what happens. Hey, look at that. I hit him, but nothing happened, so he didn't go down. Now, you can double up on actions if you want. You can move twice, you can shoot twice if you have your 2 actions available. So, look at that, I knocked him over. So he takes a wound and he's down. He can't be hit again because he's cowering on the grounds, but he'll get up automatically when his next activation happens. Now, it is possible to shoot from within a building. So let's say that this guy was in here and he wanted to shoot at me out here. Then it's all you have to do is you put your bullet on the inside threshold of the door of the building, and then you shoot out and try to hit the person. I missed, obviously. And there's extra things that can happen as well. It's possible for you in some scenarios to get an extra gun, and if you have 2 guns, then with one action you can fire 2 bullets, which is pretty cool. There's a Winchester Rifle, which gives you like a little like ramp that you shoot off of, or sort of, or like a little stencil thing that you shoot off of. I don't know. I probably should have grabbed it to show you, but Here you go. This is the Winchester Rifle. So you shoot from this thing and it gives you better aim. There's also the idea of duels. Now, if someone is inside a building and you want to get them out of there, you're tired of them shooting at you from inside the building, safe and sound, then you can maneuver and move, which remember is with the movement disc, your Cowboys meeples inside the building of the enemy, and then it is on. You have called them out in a duel. Now, the rules are kind of more nebulous on this than I would have liked. They kind of leave it up to you to decide what length that you're supposed to go off, but essentially you would set, picture that nothing else is here, you would actually set your the meeples that are involved in the duel aside, and they would literally just put themselves a certain distance away, and you take shots at each other back and forth until one of you is dead. But every time that you take a shot, you inch closer to the other person. And that's really the game. I mean, it's not a game to be taken too seriously, although, of course, different scenarios have different objectives and different goals that you can meet. You can make it as highly strategic as you want, but for the most part, as the name of the game implies, this is a game about flicking discs at people and trying to shoot them and kill them and just generally have a good time. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Component-wise, it is hard to beat Flick 'em Up. It looks fantastic. The wood is of a really high quality. It looks really visually appealing. The buildings look really great. There is some minor assembly required, putting little stickers or little protective film on the bottoms of the buildings, but really it's not that big a deal. All the components are great. Like I said, I'm not sure if the wooden box is going to last forever. That's probably the most unnecessary bit of wood that is in the game. Everything else is fantastic, all the little bullets and things like that. And I'm not in love with the theme. I kind of could totally do without Wild West themes. I think it's a very boring theme. I think it's like Wild West themes as are portrayed in popular media are even more fantastical and unrealistic than most science fiction and fantasy that I read. But I just find it a very dull theme. So I wish it was something else. I wish it was like killing aliens or something like that. But still, I can get over that because the main fun of the game is the actual mechanisms and flicking, and that is very, very fun. For me, dexterity games are hit or miss. I think Pitch Car is okay. I've had some bad experiences with it, and other dexterity games I've played that are just, they're very, very gimmicky, and that gimmick wears off very quickly. But I think there was enough game in Flick 'em Up to keep it interesting for a long period of time. The rules are deceptively simple, but at the same time there is strategy involved, determining how, this is where it actually gets into almost miniatures game territory, like how you should face your opponents and where you should go and tactically moving around the play area to get in the most strategic position. I was surprised by how much I had to actually work it out with my teammates and be like, okay, you should go here and I should go here, but wait, we got to protect our guy, so we got to move him back and put him in the building. And there's more to it than you would have suspected. It's not just flicking discs around wildly, randomly trying to hit people. There is strategy involved, so I was surprised by that. While at the same time, it's very simple. This is definitely a family weight game. You can play this with anyone. Your kids would really enjoy it, just flicking discs around and trying to hit each other. Although there are a lot of small bits, so I suppose that'd be really annoying as things go flying wildly off the table. But for people who are really strategically getting into it, I think this is definitely one of those dexterity games that bridges that gap between just being a bunch of gimmicky nonsense and being like a heavy game. It's in the middle of those two and actually blending together some cool elements. Definitely it's not going to be for everybody because of the whole dexterity thing, because there's not more meat to the actual gameplay, because once you learned all the scenarios, it's just very simply kill everyone or grab a bunch of gold. Then it just gets down into the tactical strategy of the game of just to keep people invested who are gamerly gamers. I wish the duels were explained better. That's probably the worst part of the rules. Otherwise, and some of the scenarios are kind of ambivalent too as to what's what, and how they explain hats is more complicated than it needs to be in the rule book. So that's a little bit rough, but it's not too bad. Again, this is a simple game. I just wish that duels were explained better as to how far apart you're supposed to be. They kind of leave it up to you, the gamers, which I guess is okay. But the whole idea of the duels is really great. It's another cool thematic element. I just wish it was aliens and space marines. But still, fun game. For a dexterity game, for me, I was surprised by it. I really enjoyed it. The bits are fantastic, and I know that a lot of people are really going to get into that theme and just be able to enjoy this with a wide swath of gamers. Definitely something you want to have on the table when you take it to game night to impress people who are walking by, and you'll have raucous laughter as you're playing it, which is going to draw even more eyes to it, and that's a great thing. So that is Flick 'em Up from Pretzel Games. I recommend it. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.